Hi, I'm Dr. Troy Podell, and welcome to this very special edition of the Downingtown Area School District's Career Cafe. I'm here at Downingtown West with Scott Larsen. Dr. Larsen is an intellectual property attorney. He's going to tell us all about that realm of career. Dr. Larsen, please. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the Career Cafe.
Oh, thank you. It was a great pleasure of mine to be here.
Dr. Larsen, if you could please kindly, because I've looked up your background a little bit, and I think it's really neat. If you could please kindly take us through your journey, right? It's a fascinating story.
Yeah, certainly. I think it starts actually right here at high school, right? Because I had, in high school, I didn't like physics, but I absolutely had a phenomenal chemistry teacher. And that person just inspired me to have a real interest in the physical sciences, and I was always pretty good at math and pretty good at biology. So when I went to university, I went to a small liberal arts college where the faculty just poured themselves into the students, right? There was no graduate school. And there I pursued a chemistry degree, but my ultimate goal was to be a doctor, a medical doctor, Marcus Welby, whatever. And, and I was a good student. I mean, I wasn't solid A's, I was competitive, but not I shot a little too high, right? I was looking to get into top 10 medical schools, and I got cast down. And I could have been realistic, but I chose instead, my first job was working for a winery. Ooh. And I did chemical analysis on wine, right, for a large commercial winery. And I did that, and it was fascinating. But then I got into that career world where, as I started to make improvements on the winemaking process, the management would say, no, we've done it this way for 25 years, right? I could use technology I learned in college to improve the wine process, the analytical process, and they were like, no. So I finally decided it was too boring, and I then applied to graduate school. So I went to graduate school in chemistry at the University of Colorado, and I was there for 5 years, and then I went and I still wanted to be somehow associated to medicine, and all through college I worked for a hospital as a phlebotomist in the laboratory.
Ooh.
And I was also a part-time pathology assistant, things you could do without a college degree. Right? And this is in California. And so then I went to graduate school, I finished my degree, and I wanted to be in medicine. So I got a job, actually, a postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard Medical School, working in the development of contrast imaging agents for MRI. And
so there, like iodine stuff, or
yeah. And it's this was all iron-based, but still, iodine is PET imaging.
Okay.
But contrast imaging is based around iron usually. So chelating agents around iron, and they light up the water molecules in your bloodstream. So what happened then is I did that for 2 years, and as a matter of fact, I had a number of discoveries which became inventions and became patents. And I had a bit of an interest in that, but nobody wanted to hire, back then, nobody wanted to hire a PhD chemist in the law, right? So I took a position with a company here in Pennsylvania, Johnson Matthey, and they were doing a lot of medicine around metals. Normally medicines are organic, right? But they were the company who developed carboplatin or cisplatin for ovarian cancer based on the metal platinum. And one of the guys I worked with there, graduate of MIT, extremely brilliant, he's like, we want to do nuclear medicine. So I went in and started working on nuclear medicine imaging agents, like technetium agents, cardiolite, well known today. As a matter of fact, he was the inventor of cardiolite.
Wow.
So as it turns out, I was there for like 5 years, and I had a number of inventions. And the company came, and I was doing research chemistry, and I wasn't really passionate about it, but I love chemistry. And so as it turns out, the company came through and said, we're going to lay you all off. Because Johnson Matthey is not a pharmaceutical company. They really specialize in material science. But they had this small experimental group they gave 10 years to. We were at the end of 10 years, and they said, we're going to lay you all off. So the patent attorney there said, I had a skill for this. And something we can talk a little bit more in the questions you had is how you get into this field, right?
Right.
So you do not have to be a lawyer to practice patent law. Yeah, you are amongst 99 out of 100 people who don't realize that. You do not have to be a lawyer to practice patent law. So I went off and I took the bar exam for the United States Patent Office, and I passed. And now thank you. I was fully licensed to practice patent law with a PhD in chemistry. Now, we can get back to more of that if you like. So when they laid me off, I started looking for jobs, and I got another science job, and I applied to Temple University to go to law school at night.
Go Owls.
I was in-house, it was inexpensive, and then I got picked up with a job with DuPont Pharmaceuticals. So I worked as what's called a patent agent. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm like a real estate agent. I'm a patent agent, administered license for the USPTO. So I worked for DuPont as a patent agent, prosecuting patents globally, in pharmaceutical technology while I went to law school at night. When I finished law school, then I got taken on by DuPont full-time as a lawyer, and then my job started to expand. And so I was using all of my chemistry. My father said, law? You spent all this time becoming a chemist? And I said to my dad, you don't understand. Because what I do today, and it's part of what you asked me, why do I love my job? I literally bridge the science to the law. The scientists and the inventors just get totally tied up in the rules and regulations, and yet I can bridge that gap and I can take their creativity and help them bring it to market, right? And I do that globally in like 72 countries.
Wow. And so let me follow up on that piece. What's like the real benefit, or what's really cool about international practice?
So one of the things I like about intellectual property is you're not putting criminals behind jail, bars.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's just straight business. And what's fascinating about patent law is about 120 countries recognize patent systems. And if you work for a big global company, and it doesn't have to be pharma, I mean, I work in pharmaceuticals, but it can be, material science, it can be chemical, it can be...
The entertainment industry?
Entertainment, they're on the copyright side, right, and trademark. But most countries recognize intellectual property. They all have subtly different rules. And what I like about it I've been in it 25 years now, what I like about it is I communicate with people in every country. And I learn their cultures, I learn their manners, I learn their law, and I'm respecting that. And sometimes when I'm traveling, I visit them, right? It's a very international. I've argued cases in India, I've argued cases in Europe, and then I haven't been outside of like India and Europe. I haven't been to China yet, but that's probably not too far in the future.
That's awesome. So there is no really typical day for you, but what would you describe as a typical day, or what are some of the job functions that you find yourself doing with great regularity?
So I'm going to walk into that one a little bit. So as a chemist, I started off just in the prosecution of chemical patents, right? And as I became an expert in that, and knowing how to file patents and argue them in all these different jurisdictions, then the company starts to say, okay, do you understand the opposition when people challenge you legally and you're giving opinions on freedom to operate? In other words, do you have a patent that dominates me or blocks my ability to go forward? Keep in mind, patents are what's called a negative property right. If I own a patent to the BMW and you own a patent to all German cars, you can block me from going to market. I can only block you from making BMWs. You can make Mercedes, right? So I'm always advising the client. They come to me all the time with compounds. Do we have freedom to operate? So we're always doing this global analysis to make sure you can move forward. But then you move into the trademark side for the branding of commercial people. They always want to know, can I put my trademark out there? Will I own it, right? Will people challenge me with a cease and desist, right? Then I get into the business development side where we want to license in technology. So I do all the intellectual property analysis to whether that compound, we have the right, if we acquire that compound, will somebody give us a cease and desist order?
It's due diligence, right?
Due diligence, exactly. And then on top of that, I review all publications, everything the company is going to say publicly, or intellectual property content, right? And then there's also, we do all kinds of clinical trial agreements, and we analyze the intellectual property provisions of all of those agreements. So, and I've been now involved in more negotiation for like acquiring rights or out-licensing rights. I mean, on a daily basis, I always have 3 questions to answer simultaneously, and it's just which one is more important and which one is knocking on the door.
So how do you, it's an interesting question. I'd like to follow up on that if I can. About executive function and budgeting your time. What strategies do you have? Because it seems like you're taking a lot of incoming.
Yeah, I take a lot of heat because there's So, I am a vice president, so I have a group of 5 people, 4 people in-house that I work with, and then I have like 16 lawyers outside that I constantly manage for different issues. And so how do I, literally, you kind of ask who's the requester. If it's the CEO, well, I'm sorry, you're going to get put aside.
Right.
But, then there's the next, if it's my boss, the general counsel, they get pretty high priority status. But then, I literally, for time management, I keep a piece of paper and I write the 3 things I need to do today. And then next to that, I have a piece of paper with all the things that people are asking me to do. And if I can delegate that to somebody, I put their name next to it. But if I feel it's something I have to advise on from a strategy standpoint, then it's on that to be done, but it eventually makes it to the little piece daily, right? So at the end of the day, I hope I have 3 check marks, and if some of them are minor, I put 4 or 5. And one of the things I've learned actually from time management is, and I don't know from a student's perspective, but people have their circadian cycles, and they ask you to think about when you're most awake. Right? And so I typically am most awake from like about 10 to 1, and then I go into a bit of a lull, and then I'm kind of most awake from about 2:30 to 6. And my day is generally 8 to about 7 p.m. Every day. And so that's when I choose the harder tasks, right? That's when I think I have the most energy to really tackle a bigger, issue.
That's a phenomenal piece of advice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to ask you to put a bit of a finer point on what it is that you love most about your position.
So when you're an intellectual property attorney, whether you're dealing in patents or whether you're dealing in trademarks, it's all about creativity. Now, patent law is often about looking at one abstract kind of set of language and deciding whether you fit inside of that. And so you have to do a lot of creative, sometimes construction, right? I mean, the first time I had to take a test, I was asked about a cam, and I had no idea what a cam was. But I had to figure out whether my device infringed that language, right? It's all about that language. So it's the favorite thing for me is creativity. I'm looking at trademarks. And we had a situation recently. As a matter of fact, we hit the news. We sued a company. Our name is Insight, and we have 2 double green circles, right? And there's a company in New York called Incisus, and they have a green circle. And so we sent them a cease and desist letter. And I have to sometimes look at that and say, what's the likelihood that you're going to be confused? We're both in pharmaceuticals, we're both in biologics, we're both in cancer. Who are you going to be confused by their product versus mine? And I had my marketing group wanted to create a superhero for a product, and I have to look at I have outside counsel who does a search. They come back with 6 superheroes. One's too close. Right? So I have to look at that and say, what's the likelihood the consumer is going to be confused? And if it is, then we had to change it. So we tweaked our superhero to get away. So it's always about creativity.
I love it. Love it. So you had mentioned a moment ago that you don't have to be an attorney to practice patent law.
Yes.
So how do you actually break into the field?
I love to answer that question, to be honest. So the way I explain that is, think about if you want to be a lawyer in Pennsylvania. You have to take the bar exam for the state, okay? The qualifications for the bar exam is a law degree, a JD. The qualification for that is an undergraduate degree. So you can see the path to becoming a lawyer.
Reverse engineering.
Right? So to become a patent attorney, patent law is a federal jurisdiction. It's not state, it's federal. And it's actually governed, so a patent issued is good in all 50 states. I don't have to get a separate patent in every state. So to do that, you have to be licensed before the United States Patent and Trademark Office. To do that, they have their own bar exam, just like a state. It tests you on all the rules and regulations and the laws, and you actually have a practical, you actually have to draft claims as part of the exam. But to qualify for that, you only have to have an undergraduate college degree in science or engineering, and they do accept math today because of all the computer software patenting that goes on. They will accept in computer science. And so if you have a bachelor's degree in any one of those technical or like STEM disciplines, then you could look at the patent bar. And if you get licensed, you're a full agent. As a matter of fact, as a side joke, I have an agent who works for me. She has a PhD in chemistry. She worked for DuPont 25 years. They laid her off in their mergers. I hired her on. And my boss was like, well, give her a cube. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. She should have an office. She deals with highly confidential information. And he said to me, he goes, yeah, but she's only an agent. She's not a lawyer. And I looked at him and I said, now he's the general counsel. And I said to him, you know, dude, I go, she actually can appear in court before the United States Patent and Trademark Office, before the PTAB, it's called the Patent Trial and Appeal Board. I said, you can't.
Right.
You have to be licensed at the patent office to appear there. You can't. I said, she has as much power in some respects as you do. And he agreed to that, and so he gave her an office.
That's awesome. You're welcome,
Yeah.
whoever you are.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I'm curious, in your judgment, you've had tremendous success in your career. You've risen to the level of a vice president in the corporation. What do you think it takes to be successful?
Well, I think it takes a lot of stuff. The one so mundane, but it's a passion for what you do. I mean, absolutely a passion for what you do. And I can tell you, I've had lots of setbacks. Like, you know, I love chemistry, but do I have a passion for it? Yeah, maybe not. You know, I quickly, when I hit a wall at Johnson Matthey, I diverted to law because I thought that was intellectually very fascinating, right? And suddenly I had this ability to kind of read patents and see the creativity of it and somehow pull my stuff out of it, how to argue. And I started to develop a real strong passion for that. So I would say it's a passion. 2, I would say it's resilience. You know, you see lots of times, I mean, I'm not a Mark Zuckerberg where I've had a lot of failure, right? But I have had failure. True success, I think, comes from understanding true failure. I applied to medical school. I applied to the Harvards and Princetons of the world when I was probably more qualified for University of Arizona, right? And when I didn't get there, I saw that and I bounced in a different direction. And then I was being successful in research chemistry, but I wasn't really passionate about it, and I went in another direction. But I'll give you another example. When I was coming out of Boston and looking for a job, I actually applied to a law firm in Washington, D.C. to be a technical specialist, right, in the law firm and then to go to law school. And I was interviewed by 8 lawyers, and 7 of them said, wow, you were great. You're a person, you're a people person, you're articulate, you're creative, you can solve problems because they asked me questions on how I'd solve them. I'd be great in front of a jury, they said, But the senior partner said to me, no, we're not going to offer you a job. And they said, argue back. He wants to see you argue. So I argued back. I said, why? He goes, well, you're too mobile. Everything you own. In the interview, I said, everything I own could go in 20 boxes. And he said, if you didn't like this job, why should I invest in you? You could move on. And I said, I'm a graduate student. Someday I'll have a house.
Right.
So at the end of the interview, he then finally said to me, look, I'm not going to hire you because you're not married. It's totally illegal.
Yeah.
It's totally illegal. But it's his word against mine. Big law firm partner, graduate student. And, I said, okay. So I took that as a hit and I went, move on, right? And I think that's often the success of it. You want to be successful in a career, you have to have passion for it. And in like patent law, I started with the niche of patent prosecution, and then you start adding on little pieces of it. Next thing you know, I can do everything about intellectual property globally. And corporations, as I say, you might have your losses, you might have your setbacks, but I think the world always offers an opportunity.
What I love about your story is that the pivots come later after the degree, and then you require more education to be more empowered, right? Like you're discovering patent law in your 20s, right? Whereas, as an undergraduate, I don't think you would have thought that that's...
You're absolutely correct. I mean, nobody through high school or college ever, even graduate school, breathed about patent law, right, as a possibility. And as a matter of fact, when I went to graduate school, my advisor, for him, it's all about prestige. When I started to identify postgraduate opportunities, he'd be like, no. He's like, no. And I got offered a position at Princeton, and he's like, maybe. And then I got this position at Harvard, and he was like, yes. And the professor at Princeton had a much bigger pedigree than the guy at Harvard, but he just I liked going into medicine. I liked the idea of pharmaceutical agents. I liked all of that. So it worked out, really well. So.
To that end, put yourself in the shoes of the advisor. This is a last question I ask everybody. You've got 17-year-old Scott Larsen by the shoulders. Mm-hmm. What do you tell him?
Well, again, it kind of gets back to what do you want to do? And don't ever give up, right? I mean, don't ever give up. I'll give you a slightly different story. My niece, right, today she's in her 30s. She went to Unionville High School, and she was always interested in business. And she went to St. Joe's College and got a degree in marketing, and she wanted to be in music, right? And my brother was like, oh, just get a job as an accountant, right? And she wanted to be in music, and she took a job working for a company in New York City, I can't think of the name of it, but a big talent company, right? In the mailroom. College degree in the mailroom, and she did it, they started all their new employees there. 3 or 4 months, moved, started working for one of the biggest agents in rap, right? And her life was as miserable as the devil wears Prada. I kid you not. Right. I used to listen to her cry all the time. She stuck that out for 6 years and learned the industry because she had a passion for being, today she represents like a major rap artist, right? And she was representing another one who now has moved, for whatever fickle reason. But she's making a huge career out of that industry. And that's even tougher than what I've ever faced, right? But I would say a 17-year-old Scott Larsen, I'd say follow your instincts, follow the passion at your heart, because when you pour into that, and then be mindful of opportunities that come your way. Because, when I talk to college students in chemistry, you could become a chemist, right? You could become a chemist for a pharmaceutical company or ExxonMobil. You could become a school teacher. You could go to graduate school and become a college professor. You could actually, with a college degree, you could apply to the United States Patent and Trademark Office to be an examiner. You could work as an examiner for 4 or 5 years, and they would train you in the law, and you'd be golden to a law firm, right? I mean, serious, it's like, and even if you go, I'm going a little bit off track.
No, not at all.
But even if you, like I mentor people at work, I've mentored 4 or 5, and it's like, they've come in to be chemists, and then they come over and they want to be patent attorneys, right? But then there's people like our biologists, they move to the clinical side, and they use all of their biology knowledge, and they say, well, I'm interested in patient care. So they move to the clinical side, they learn how to develop the clinical trials, and then they can always move back. And as you broaden your skill set, using one to build on another, as long as there's some kind of sequence to that, you will, rise higher. You might start your own consulting company for a niche that you're an expert in, right? There's all different ways of doing it.
So it's resilience and it's being open to opportunities.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The 2 sage pieces of advice.
So,
Dr. Larsen, I want to thank you so much for giving it to our students.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a great pleasure.
For being with us today.
Yeah.
That'll about do it for this very special edition of the Career Cafe. This is Dr. Podell signing off.